A while back, we had a little bit of coverage in the UK about politicians receiving vitriolic abuse, particularly online. And the coverage focused on the fact that this went beyond normal criticism and also it was directed at particularly female members. Now, that might be the BBC just being pro-feminist, and that may not be the whole picture. I personally think that male MPs get just as much abuse, but perhaps it's a slightly different nature. For example, male MPs generally aren't going to get rape threats in a way that some female MPs might. Um, just to be absolutely clear, I think rape threats are disgusting against anyone. Um, I think death threats are going too far. So clearly, there are some things that people do online that they think they'll get away with, or they use the screen as a sort of cover to do things that they would not do in the outside world, you know. And generally, I'm a believer that for the most part, what you say online, you should be prepared to say in real life, or you should be prepared to back up what you say online rather than being a troll. I say most of the time because there are some circumstances, particularly people who live under totalitarian states, where that is the only way they can express dissent. And that's not a case of being cowardly, that is just the reality. It's a practical thing. Um, but on this issue of politicians taking criticism, I think there's two things here. I think there is abuse that goes beyond just criticism, and I don't agree with that. I think that it's not a good way to conduct an argument if you're simply sending out threats to people. Name calling is petulant, but part of me does believe that okay, politicians. I've sometimes defended politicians as a profession because that's not a popular thing to do. They're a bit like lawyers, they're not generally in democratic societies. Most politicians don't have very high approval ratings. It just seems to be something about the nature of being in a system where you are heavily scrutinized. Um, how you're far more likely to hear people say something like this, oh, they're all the same, they're only in it for themselves, as I respect this man or this woman, they are working hard for their constituents. Now, I happen to believe that the latter is actually true. I happen to believe that most politicians are probably decent people who see problems in society and want to make a difference. But let's face it, as a profession, they get quite a bad rap. I mean, one can be forgiven for thinking, especially in election time, who would want to be a politician? I mean, those who say they're in it for the money, well, compare a politician's salary to a footballer or a media executive or a banker. It's a lot less than what those people get. I mean, it's a comfortable amount. I'm not saying they get too little. I think they get quite a lot. Certainly, they get a lot more than a nurse or a soldier gets, or a police officer. And one could argue they deserve it just as much, if not more. But people need to remember being a politician is not an easy profession. You're under massive scrutiny, you're under huge pressure from the media all the time. Um, every statement will be analysed, So I don't agree with those who think it's easy or that they're all in it for themselves. I think that's just nonsense. I remember one LBC presenter made the case because a woman was criticising about Jeremy Corbyn. For me, it wasn't about Corbyn or Dunton or any other politician. The point was she was saying, "Oh, they're all in it for themselves." And the presenter, I can't recall who it was now. I think it was Matt Stadlin, who I think is a pretty practical-minded guy. I quite like a lot of his positions. He said that that's complete nonsense. You know, these people are going up and down the country trying to get your vote, tirelessly campaigning. So the idea that they've never done real work in their lives is really unfair, and I agree with that. So I do think that sometimes the criticism against politicians is unfair. I also think people have a tendency to make crass generalizations. Having said that, something I have noticed recently is that there is an increasing number of politicians in this country who are censoring their Facebook pages, or rather, their staff are. An example of this is Hamza Yusuf, the SNP's justice spokesman. Well, actually, he's a cabinet secretary for justice in Scotland. That's quite a powerful position. This is the man responsible for justice policy in Scotland, um, and who recently made the controversial proposal for new legislation to override the old archaic blasphemy legislation in Scotland. Now, this is controversial. Many people see it as an attack on freedom of expression. It's already attracted quite a lot of controversy. Here's the thing: I went to his page to express my thoughts on this, and I'll come to that in a second. But I got a message saying the admins of this page will vet your comment or something along those lines. Now, here's my question. If you are a legislator and you're making decisions that impact people's lives, and this is not in the capacity of a constituency MP, he is the Justice Secretary for Scotland for 5 million people. Um, Surely the public should have a right to question that. Now, I don't live in Scotland, but my parents do, and Scotland's part of the UK, so it's a matter of, although it's a devolved issue, as far as I'm concerned, it's got some echoes of England's controversial hate crime legislation. Um, so my question to Hamza Yusuf is, why are you censoring comments? Do you only want approving comments? You know, why can't you take criticism? So I think that's an example of, and he's not the only one. There's other politicians out there who censor comments, and I would say if you are in a position of power and you're making legislation, you have to be willing to take criticism. Now, if people are making death threats online, that's a different matter. They should be either blocked or reported or ignored. But I have a big problem with this idea that you're making legislation, but you won't let people criticize you on your page. I think that, we live in a world where social media is a major, major form of communication. It is. So it's one avenue that the public have to dissent. This is something that's perhaps not spoken about enough. So, frankly, politicians should take it on the chin. I mean, if I'm an elected representative, I know that not everyone's going to like the things that I do or say. And I cannot just censor opinions that I dislike. I don't have to engage with them. But I think censoring those comments sends out the wrong message. And the comment I left, by the way, I wasn't just insulting the guy, I wasn't just being a troll. I was expressing genuine concerns as a British citizen that here we have a politician in one of the UK home nations trying to enact what I see as basically borderline blasphemy laws. Certainly, his proposed legislation raises a lot of questions. So, I think that's quite concerning when politicians are not willing to take criticism. And of course, he will say, "Oh, I am. I get questioned all the time by journalists." But no, you have to be able to take public anger. Obviously, it's a different matter if people are just being petulant and just throwing out insults. Although, even then, I don't think there should be any. I don't think that, for example, should be a criminal offence. I think the only time that the police should get involved or it should be a legal issue is if people are making threats. And I do think that should be taken seriously because we saw what happened to Joe Cox, right? And there's been other examples where politicians have been violently attacked. So I do think threats should be taken seriously. I don't think that's a trivial matter. But insults, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying people should just insult for the sake of it. But I frankly think if you're a politician, you need tough skin. And if you don't have tough skin, if you're going to go to the police every time someone criticizes you, or at least every time someone insults you, you're in the wrong profession. Because you're in a profession where you're making decisions about people's lives that will impact people's lives. So if Hamza Yusuf, if he cannot take criticism on his Facebook page, if he only wants an echo chamber of people agreeing with him, and looking at the comments, that seems to be the case because all the comments are positive. So clearly, his team is censoring criticism. It's cowardly. It's frankly quite cowardly. And he can say, "Oh, but I get scrutiny from journalists." It's not the same thing. Because very often journalists sanitize their questions. Okay, the tabloids are quite rough, and one can argue they should be. I think sometimes the tabloids can be quite crass actually in their criticism. But one thing I am adamant about is the public should have scope to peacefully dissent. That means robust criticism, if need be. And I am a bit wary that because there have been examples of clear threats and abuse, some politicians are using that as an excuse to deflect all criticism. So let's say, for example, Hamza Yusuf has been subject to genuinely hateful comments. That's wrong, but that's not an excuse to just censor all negative comments. If someone's making a criticism of his policies, he has to take it on the chin as an elected representative. And if he can't do that, he's in the wrong profession. And I would say it's quite cowardly, because he's making decisions about lives. His legislation will impact people's lives, yet he's not willing to take criticism. Why not?